Actually, maybe we're not quite different from each other because actually that should be my first question because I know about you that you're a multidimensional musician. You're composing music, you're improvising music, you're writing and thinking about music, you're teaching music, and with some small changes, that's also me. I'm a composer. I'm a piano player, not cello, but piano. I play different styles of music, from jazz and classical to free improvisation, of course. Not so often, but if it's needed, yes. So I teach musical theory. The recent years I also write more extensively than before about music and about contemporary music in particular. So different countries, different generations, but we're a bit the same, at least that looks like. And so the first question that I want to ask is about this kind of experience. I have a friend of mine who asked me a bit of time ago about these different kinds of occupations. Are they helpful for you? Or are they kind of problem? Do you have time for all of them? Do you have enough concentration? Or do you have to switch from one to another kind of musical experience? And what this versatility gives to you, and maybe gives it. Does it give you some insights, or maybe gives you some troubles? So what can you say about it?
Okay. When I'm asked about my profession, I don't say I'm composer, I don't say I'm improviser, I don't say I'm musicologist or whatever, or I don't say I'm teacher. I just say I'm musician. So for me, musician is something is something that's a whole thing. You know, it's all together is music. Music is making it in the very moment. Music is creating it, thinking about it, reflecting it, and also teaching it. It's all. I think I have this understanding of my profession that all these things go together, and I think the most important thing behind it is that you love music.
Definitely, yes. So, okay, and as I understood, you started to improvise music in the age of 20 plus, 21 to 22, yeah? Is that right?
Improvising. I started to improvise as a kid, as everybody does. I think every kid starts to improvise, and I was so lucky that nobody told me stop it. So I went on. I went on when I was 16, and with 18, I had my first free jazz band. It was just natural to make it. You know, I had no idea about improvising. I just made it. And when I started to improvise together with other people, I had to discover that listening is a very important thing there. I didn't know that before. Of course, listening is important with music, but nobody told me when you improvise, you have to listen. So I had to learn that. So I really had to learn step by step everything. And just by doing and just by making it together, then I was in a scene in Aarau in Switzerland. It's a small town of, I don't know how many inhabitants it has now, maybe around 20,000. Quite a small city, but with a very strong cultural life. and there were a couple of musicians around, and we were just playing together, having jams, and so I went into it, and then I had an encounter with a musician that lived in Zurich, and he said, "Hey, come play with us. I have a big band project. You have to be part of it." So I went to Zurich and played there, and I started more and more to enter the whole scene in Switzerland, and I learned so much from elder people, musicians that were older than me, maybe 10 years older, 20 years older, but they gave me so much, and it was just a collecting of experience. So I came into it,
So, and through your experience, what do you consider are the changes in musical landscape, maybe in Switzerland, maybe even broader in Europe, between the middle of 70s and the current time? What changed in improvisational scene, or maybe in musical scene in general?
From the mid-70s to today, wow. Well, as I told you, I started playing free jazz. And of course, from the moment when I could read music, I also started to write music. I also started to compose little unimportant stuff, but I did it, So at this time, I had, if thinking back, free jazz was very much present, but not only. There were already some musicians who wanted to go further in improvisation, who wanted to discover new areas. And these were the musicians that interested me, because I was at the same time and in the same amount interested also into contemporary music and into composed music. And the scene of the Swiss composers at this time was very mixed. So it had a very strong conservative side, but it had also some people who were very experimental in their thinking. And for instance, Hans Wüthrich was one of them, or also my teacher, Hans-Ulrich Lehmann. Hans Wüthrich was also a teacher of mine, of course, and others who were thinking or Urs Peter Schneider, for instance, they were thinking in a very experimental way, and they influenced strongly also a younger scene. So I think it was a very exciting time, actually, the end of the 70s and the beginning of the 80s. And also the different genres in music, they were not anymore so clear. So the improvisers were very much interested into composition, as the composers started to be interested into improvisation. And they started also to have contact and exchange. And within this scene, I was lucky to know a lot of people, and I was lucky also to be able to bring people together. So somehow I could also help a bit to, the contacts grew stronger in the German-speaking part of Switzerland. Also, the different improviser scenes of Basel and Zurich, they started to have more contacts. Bern started to have contacts, and so they were in the beginning. They were like small islands, and they grew more and more together. And And if I now compare with today, it's a totally different time. So if we look at the scene, there are a lot of very, very competent improvisers around. And especially there are a lot of people around who are able to perform contemporary music as to improvise on a very high level as well. And sometimes they also compose, or they are so there is a very big creative potential around. Astonishingly, there is also there can be also seen something like this idea of the islands. I mean, this has maybe to do with the geographic situation of Switzerland, that Zurich and Basel and Bern and Lucerne, that they have their own scenes. Although they are, of course, in contact, but the scenes, they develop in a particular way. And in Zurich, there is on one side a very interesting improviser scene, which I'm part of. Also, a lot of young people coming, new people coming, but there are also a lot of interesting composers, and I think in recent years, especially in the field of music theater, there happened a lot. In Zurich, experimental music theater that's going more into non-drama music. So, and Basel has also a strong improviser scene, which is also partly influenced by what's happening at the Musikakademie Basel, Hochschule für Musik, so at the University of Music in Basel, where Uli Fussenegger is the head of the contemporary music department. I think you had him in an interview already.
Not him, but yes, probably he was there. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm working there as an improvisation professor. So a lot of, or some of the people who study with us, who do their master in Basel in improvisation, they decide to stay. And they stay in Basel, and the scene grows. But there was, of course, already a very strong scene there, and a lot of very interesting people. And we also try to connect the students with the local scene, that this also grows together and gives a creative climate. Another side of coming also out of this school is a strong ensemble scene. And now the interesting thing is that these ensembles, the young ensembles, I mean, there are also established ensembles, Collegium Novum in Zurich, or Gontherchamp in Geneva, or Phoenix in Basel, and so on. There are quite some ensembles which have already a long tradition and history, but there are a lot of young ensembles coming out, and sometimes very small, sometimes bigger ensembles, and they think in a very experimental way. So they think about curating their programs. Maybe they even invite a curator for one special program, or they work very much in a collaborative manner. So there is a lot of collaboration with composers. They invite, for instance, a composer to work with them, to create a piece together with them, so that they that there is not this hierarchy. Here is the composer and here is the ensemble. They get the score and they perform, but they meet on the level of their eyes. and they do the work together and they create it together. And this has also a lot to do with experience of improvisation from both sides. Mm-hmm. So you see, at the moment, there and of course, there are also collaborations with visual artists, and so there is a very open situation, and I think it's. I'm really excited about that, to perceive that what happens at the moment, what young people do, and this also influences myself in my thinking. So I think this is. I mean, I'm already old, but. There is an exchange between, and this is extremely fruitful situation, I think.
Okay, thank you. That's great. I particularly like an idea of making music together, the composer and the ensemble. I think that's a great perspective, and good that you have it there in Switzerland. So I'm not sure about next question. Okay, let's do a little kind of intermedia. So I know that you teach you said it, you teach in free improvisation. So let's imagine that you have before you a new just formed an ensemble which wants to play free improvisational projects. What can be the practical advice you can give them? Just one, maybe the most important one.
Well,
maybe not one, maybe several.
I say I teach improvisation. This doesn't mean that I understand myself to be a teacher, because I think you can't teach improvisation. I think you have to teach yourself. You have to do all the experiences yourself, because you are the creative musician. You have to create yourself. And I can't give you any recipes how to create yourself. You have to find them yourselves. What I can do is creating situations where you can make these experiences. And there I can help. And I can create an atmosphere where interesting things can happen. So that's my main concern as a teacher. Of course, I can have also my tools, and I can also, we analyze what's happening and stuff like that, and we try to verbalize what happens, which is very important to think about, to reflect, that the reflection starts to work. But basically, if you ask me what's your advice, maybe I would say, first of all, I want to listen to you. Just play.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect advice.
Play a free improvisation, and then I can give a feedback, and then we can start to find ways.
Great, thank you. Actually, I have a small ensemble here in Rostov-on-Don, in my town in Russia. We don't do only improvised music, but we try from time to time some improvisational practices. Mm-hmm. And I think I'll tell them about what did you just say. So now maybe let's speak about relations between your compositional and improvisational, maybe instrumental experience. There is a problem that interests me for some time now, the problem of notation, of fixation of musical material. Because you have two ways of making music, yes, by composition or by improvisation. How did you decide, or do you decide that maybe this kind of material I want to notate, it deserves notation, and this kind of material I leave for live, I can generate it live? How did you make difference between these two kind of materials? Where is the border between them for you?
That's a very difficult question. First of all, maybe we have to question the word material. What is material? I think sound is not something like a brick or beton or whatever. Sound is something that's alive. So it's kind of like a living being. So is a living being material? I think, of course, we are also this is material, if you want to say so. But I mean, I guess you understand what I mean with it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's something that's alive, and
so
if there are the sounds, you have to ask the sounds, what do you need? Does the sound need to be totally fixed?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, write it down. Does the sound need to be every time a little bit different? Maybe you notate it in a more open way, that the ensemble or the performers, that they create it in the very moment. Or if you want to have a sound that is coming totally out of a common flow of time,
yeah,
leave it totally open. So I think it has also a lot to do with timing. If you notate something very strictly with a pulse or whatever, in this way, you have to coordinate in an ensemble, and that coordination very often means it's one person who is responsible for the flow of the time. One person gives the time. This person, of course, in an ensemble can change permanently. So it's not always the same person giving the time, but it's always one person being responsible for one moment. And in free improvised music, this is totally different. There, everybody at the same time is responsible for the time. And I think you could question also this side, whether you want to have a sound in a strict time, or whether you want to have a sound in an open time.
Yeah, sure.
Flow going through everybody, also through the audience, of course, because the audience always is also part of it.
Okay, thank you. So that gives me a chance for next question about maybe not audience, but about listening experience. When you listen your own improvisations as a listener afterwards, do you have some special experience? Did your experience differ from inside during the time of improvisation and after it when you listen in it? Can you maybe describe this difference? Maybe how often or how much do you listen as a composer? Do you have some kind of specific composer type of listening?
Maybe first one thing, if you are standing at the Neva and are looking at the water flowing, that's very different than if you are looking at the photograph of the Neva from the same angle. So
definitely
the life experience of listening to music created live in the moment or creating it yourself is very different from the recording. So the recording is like the photograph. So listening to the recording means, you have to be aware of that. And, well, you've grown older. What you've played before is part of your experience, is in your backpack. And you listen to to the recording with this experience in your backpack, so you listen already differently than you listened before while making. And then you remember, I'm here, I made this and this decision, okay, did I do this, and so on. You can start to reflect what you didn't do while making it. Because when you're playing free improvised music, you're not thinking with words, you're thinking in music, and this is a different part of your brain. So it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen in your brain, but it's in another part of your brain. So thinking in words is much too slow when you're improvising. So you don't think in words. But when you listen back to it, you can think in words, and you can start to verbalize what happened in certain moments. And this gives you another experience to put in your backpack. So with every listening experience, your backpack grows, or the content of your backpack grows. And next day you improvise with this experience. Now, the influence between the experience of improvised music, or the influence from improvised music to composed music.
Yeah.
Well, this is also a very big theme, and I think it's very individual for people who make both. So for me, it was a development. When I started to improvise, I had here improvisation. And I started to compose, I had here composition. Two things that had nothing to do with each other. And this was actually for a long time, because the methods to make music are very, very different. When you... the goal is the same. You want to have good music in the end, hopefully. but the process to get there is totally different. When you improvise, you think a lot about what you do before you do it, and afterwards when you've done it. But while you are making it, you are totally in the music and in the very moment creating it. And this is a process in real time. When you're composing, you can start at one point, write something down, think. You have all time of the world to make it.
Yeah. And I just remembered this quotation. I'm not sure about who said it. Yes. And improvisation, you just have 15 seconds.
Steve Lacy, was it? Yes.
Steve Lacy, yeah.
Steve Lacy. It's a great quotation. It's a really great quotation. And but you have also the possibility to throw things away, which is something important in composition. In improvisation, you can't. Every sound you do is a fact, and it's there. And you can't change it, even if the sound is a mistake. So somehow you could say in improvised music, you can't make any mistakes, because you only can produce facts, and you have to deal with these facts. And if one of these facts you create in a moment, you discover, this was not such a good idea to bring this fact. It's there anyway, and everybody hears it and deals with it, and you yourself deal also with it. And maybe 10 seconds later, it was a good decision that you produced this, that in the moment sounded like a bad decision. So somehow yeah, that's why I say you can't make mistakes. In composition, you can make many mistakes, but you also can correct them.
Yes.
So these were two different things for me. Growing older, it grew more and more together, I must say. So, I mean, of course, the reflection of composing influences a lot what you do when you improvise, and your musical experiences when you improvise, especially how to deal with time or how to deal with sound, how you can create the sound, how you can give life to a sound. This influences a lot how you compose. I think this, and it doesn't mean, I mean, you can write anything down and you can improvise free on two different rails, but of course it influences each other. Now in the more recent decade of my work, I start more and more in finding ways to combine it also, and to look for collaboration with the performers.
Yes.
Even if it's a virtual collaboration, you know, that you design the collaboration on the paper and it happens later. So it can also be a remote teamwork, but the word teamwork becomes more and more important for me, or thinking about teamwork.
Yes. Actually, you just almost predicted my next question. It's very simple. Do you often include improvised sections in your pieces?
Yes. In more recent ensemble pieces, yes. Yeah. Yes. Or it's more kind of like a guided improvisation, but there is also some free improv in it. So I just... 2 months ago, I finished a piece for recorder and ensemble, written for the ensemble of Helena Winkelmann. And the recorder player totally improvises free. So he has only very few moments where he is said, yeah, could go this direction, but all his decisions he does himself.
Mm-hmm. So it is written for this particular performer, yes?
Yes. Yes.
And if you want this piece to be performed by someone else, do you give some instructions for the type of performance, of the type of improvisation he need to do, or it's totally free? Because of course, different performer will do it probably very, very different way.
Yes, and this is welcome. I mean, a piece doesn't have to sound every time the same. Hopefully not. It's interesting because the name of our talk is connected with Stravinsky, and Stravinsky kind of was the contrary. He once said that his recordings he did with the Columbia Orchestra are part of the score. And I must say, luckily, nobody does this. Everybody is looking for the
I even read the article when someone compared the performances given by Stravinsky himself with the indications in the score, metronomical indications, for example. Mm-hmm. And Stravinsky contradicts himself.
Yes. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yes, I mean, I've seen once a movie where he conducted. This was impressive. Absolutely. How he suggested the gesture of the music to the orchestra, like a cat, kind of. So it was really great to see that. But this in brackets, yes. No, I mean, there are composers who really want to define what they do and want that it sounds every time really as it's written, and I'm not this kind of type. I like when performers are looking in their own way at a score and show me things in the score which I even might not have thought of, and I can discover something new. I like this open situation a lot. So it's coming back to this piece with the solo recorder.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are a few indications. You might discover that it's the same piece, but with another recorder player, it would sound different. And I mean, Konrad Steinmann, he's a fantastic recorder player. He will do the first performance of the piece. I could very well imagine that also other recorder players could play it who are able to improvise as in such a virtuoso way as Konrad knows it. And I know people who are able to do that. So yeah.
Okay, a bit different type of question maybe. I tried to listen some of your pieces before I came here, and read something about you at your personal site, and several times I met phrases, sentences about heterogeneity, which you like in music, which you try to introduce into music. But when I listened to when I started to listen to your music, I estimated maybe not college-like music, but actually what I heard was quite homogeneous to me. So what's heterogeneity for you? What do you mean by this word? Which type of materials do you try to put together? What do you want to do with them in there? Try to find their internal unity, or maybe try to mark the contrast between them, and so on. Or maybe I just didn't found the best examples of heterogeneity in your music. So if so, which pieces do you recommend to listen, and maybe importantly, when to not when, but where to listen them?
Yeah, I mean, heterogeneity is extremely important to me, that things that even might not have to do something together come together. So, for instance, the sound of the environment enters a composed piece. So it's like you open up the window and the outer world enters the piece. And there are several pieces using that, for instance. But in a wider sense, I'm in the compositions, I'm often looking for different situations. As an example, on the layer of harmony, that you have very different principles of dealing with harmony, and I construct them in a way that there are bridges in between. That means that I can modulate from one way of dealing with harmony to another, having, like in traditional modulation, having something in common. So you have kind of a heterogenic harmonic concept in a piece, but it's moving in an organic way from one to another. And this happens a lot in many of my pieces, this way of thinking, of finding bridges between different situations and modulating from situation A to situation B.
Okay, thank you. So, just a simple question to finish this part and come into the next. Is there something in music which you never will do?
Oof, I don't know. I mean, the biggest part of my life is gone. There are still things I haven't done yet.
Maybe not because of lack of time, but because you refuse to do something. Is there something you refuse to do in music?
Tasteless things, I think.
Yeah.
But then again, the question comes, what is taste? And this is a very personal thing. So things I personally think that are tasteless, I wouldn't do. But I can very well imagine to write a piece in C major, for instance, when I find a new context for it, that this C major sounds totally fresh to my ears. And I might do it. So I try, I kind of try in every piece, I try to find another approach or a slightly different approach from what I did before. So I try to invent something new and not to repeat too much the ideas, the old ideas. Also. Because when you start to repeat yourself, you have to stop, I think.
I know one Russian composer, more or less your generation, who speaks, at least spoke before the same idea. His name is Viktor Yakimovsky, and he, you know him, yes?
Yes, of course, I know his music.
He said several times, maybe many times, that he doesn't want to repeat himself. He wants to invent something new in each new piece by him. And this is good bridge for my next question. About maybe relationships between Russia and Switzerland. Because it's always interesting to know how something what happens here is seen from abroad. So what do you know about contemporary Russian music? Maybe of your generation, like Yakimovsky, Tarnopolsky, Smirnov, and so on. Maybe about more recent generations. I know that your music was performed several times in Russia, at least 2 times in St. Petersburg. And maybe you have some else contacts with Russia.
Well, I have, amongst others, I have a very important, or for me, very important contact to Sergei Chirkov, accordion player and a really complete musician.
Yeah, he's a fantastic player. Yeah,
incredible musician, also improviser. We happened recently also to improvise together, and it was a fantastic experience. And I was so lucky to write also music for him. And it's a huge piece called Accordion Book. It's consisting of 17 pieces, but again, I'm talking about me. I should talk about the Russians.
No, that's okay.
But I mean, this is for me a very important contact and friendship. So we have a very good exchange with each other.
And do you know about Russian improvisational scene?
Yes, a little bit. I mean, there just arrived a young Russian improviser in Zurich, living here. We already met. And I'm getting old. My remembrance of names is very bad. So I would have to look up his name. I'm sorry. It doesn't come.
That's quite interesting about Russian improvisers in Zurich.
Yeah, he's working with electronics and playing saxophones and also brass instruments. And he does a very noisy music, very energetic also, which I really appreciated when I was listening to it. So it's more, and that's I think is not the only one. I think there is quite a scene in Russia that goes into this very noisy and also loud kind of music and like that high energy, loud and noise bands and I think there is happening a lot of interesting stuff. Of course, it doesn't happen only in Russia. It happens I think everywhere. Also in Asia, you find a lot of them, and it happens in the US also. There is a network all over the world of this young noise musicians, and actually they have also a tradition. Maybe they don't know it, but in the early 80s it started already in the US and also in Europe. There were the first loud noise bands. So there is a strong scene in this direction. But there is also, I think, a scene in the other direction of finding very soft and very differentiated sounds. What considers me personally in relation to both, I must say I'm interested in both. So, I really like the very fine, structured, improvised music. As I also like to play in a louder and noisy context, so I can appreciate both.
Actually, I think there is also a line of improvisational music in Russia which do quite quiet and very the opposite of dance. I can't remember the word. So, quite free music. We have not so many sounds. They are not so loud, and it's more like creating situations and atmosphere than harsh noise bands. We have also at least one improvisation orchestra in St. Petersburg. I don't know if you heard about them, but anyway, yes.
And I mean another one I met is Danil Gorokov. He's a trombone player. He studied in Basel, and we met there. And I mean, he's a great player.
I didn't hear about him.
Contemporary music and a fantastic improviser.
Great.
I think he's based in Petersburg now.
The name to trace, I think I didn't hear about him. So, in the interview for the Swiss Music Prize nomination, it's on YouTube. You said something about can't remember the exact quotation, but about that you do kind of marginal music, yes? Marginal. So how do you feel yourself as a figure into the mainstream or out of mainstream? And do Swiss academic music have a mainstream? And if yes, what is it?
Difficult to say because in Switzerland there are so many different movements, and I mean it's not only in Switzerland; it's all over the world. So we are living actually in a very interesting time because we are allowed to do everything, and the important thing is that you also know that you have to do it yourself now. You can't rely anymore on schools or on rules and on anything.
Yes.
You have to really invent your way yourself, and maybe marginal in this sense that the audience is not very big for this kind of music, especially in improvised music. Maybe in composed music a little bit bigger, but not really. But the important thing is that the scene is very alive and that thousands of different things happen at the same time. And I personally enjoy that a lot. So this has also to do with heterogeneity. That
you said
I really like extremely different kinds of music. I can enjoy listening to heavy metal music as I can to hardcore free improv, as I can to jazz, as I can to Japanese note theater, as I can to an Arab improviser or on the oud. On the lute, and so on, or an African drum orchestra or whatever. So I can enjoy a lot of music, and all of this music can refresh my thinking. It doesn't mean that I have to take it and make it my own, not at all. I mean, listening to music also always means listening with respect for what all these people created. And listening with respect doesn't mean I'm composer, I can take it and can destroy it.
But why not? That's a kind of compositional strategy, one of... So maybe the last question, I'm not sure if I should ask it, because I ran out, we also ran out of time, almost. When were the time that when you understood, yes, that's it, I'm a composer? At which time it was?
At which time? Actually, I can nearly date it. It was in 1984. Although I was already a composer then and an improviser, and yeah. At the age of 29 already, I was composing, I was improvising, and then I had a grant to go to Paris. And I could live for half a year in Paris, and I could really work there. And there I started to compose bigger pieces than before, and suddenly then I felt, yes, that's it. That's what I do. Now I'm a composer. So I had to become quite old to be sure of that.
Actually, that's inspiring story. Thank you very much. It was very interesting for me. I hope also for the readers and or listeners. And have a good time. Have a good new projects. Probably we can stop here, or maybe speak about something else.
Yeah, thank you so much for your very interesting and inspiring questions. And I would like to go on now for another hour, but then I would like to ask the questions to you as a colleague and to know more about what you do and about your music. And I would love to listen to examples of your music, and so that we really can make a dialogue.
We can chat through Miroslava. I can send something to you, but maybe that stops interview. We can just have conversation after it. Actually, I don't know what to tell about myself. For the recent 2 years, I did less compositional projects and more about speaking about music, writing about music, manage an ensemble when we do some improvisations or we play some minimalist music, we play jazz, we play different things from Stockhausen to Terry Riley. And that occupied me for 5 years already. We began in 2016, and that's the first kind of such ensemble of contemporary music in my hometown. Because in Russia we have a quite different situation. We have big cities, not to 20,000, but about 1 million in Rostov-on-Don, but not so rich cultural life, unfortunately. So we need to invent or to make a foundation of almost everything, because if you want to improvise, we need to start and improvise, because we can't go to the concert with improvised music, because there is nothing, no, almost nothing, of course. So I think, of course, we have Moscow and St. Petersburg, two Russian capitals, where cultural life is much bigger and much wider. But in other cities, many times there are quite less options, and we create these options maybe right now. The first generations to do it. I'm in contact with musicians from very different stylistical groups, almost with everyone who wants to do something experimental, so something different from their usual experience. We collaborate with jazz musicians, sometimes with dancers, sometimes with video artists, and electronic ambient musicians, and so on. So that's I can say that's a kind of islands inside one city. And now we try to connect these islands through a series of bridges and do something bigger through it. Like that, and my music is very different from time to time. I can write absolutely minimalist music in last year, and next year I can write something quite experimental with electronics, also live electronics, with harmonic or textural experiments. It depends on context. And in Russia, I think, yes, it's also kind of heterogeneity. but it's stratified. I think we need more connection between these different musical zones, connection and interaction, maybe some influences, and when we have it, maybe something bigger or something interesting will grow. So that's my final monologue.
Yeah, but actually you're doing, in your city, you're doing a very important work, it seems. I would love to hear it. Do you have
maybe I'll send you something, some things we do. We have free jazz improvising soundtracks, improvised soundtracks with movies like Battleship Potemkin. We did it 2 times last year, and it was actually probably the first experience of this kind in Rostov.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So please send me some music.
Okay, thank you very much.